Things that invalidate and do not invalidate prayer. 475. FESAD means corruption, and FSAD also means to corrupt. Their opposites are SALAH, validity, and ISLAH. In worship, FESAD and BUTLAN are synonyms. An act of worship, that is FASID, is also called BATIL. A thing that invalidates something or removes IT from its valid state is called a MÜFSID. Its plural is MÜFSIDAT. Just as a prayer becomes invalid if one of its conditions or pillars is missing, it can also become invalid due to the presence of certain things after the prayer has begun with these conditions and pillars in place. These things that invalidate prayer are called MÜFSIDAT-I SALÂT. Some of these were already discussed earlier. Here, we will list the main things that invalidate a prayer that has been begun with the required conditions and essential elements, namely 1. Speaking even 2 letters during prayer, to the extent that the person praying can hear it, invalidates the prayer. In this regard, intention, mistake, sleep, and error are equivalent. 2. Crying out loud, enough for the sounds to be distinguishable due to illness or calamities such as the loss of property or a friend, or moaning, eh, saying f, or blowing on dust, or saying ufta. 2. Express disgust, invalidates the prayer, crying, sighing, or groaning out of fear of the Almighty Allah, or in remembrance of paradise or hell, does not invalidate the prayer. A groan or moan caused by an illness so severe that one cannot control oneself also does not invalidate the prayer. 3. If a member of the congregation is moved to tears by the Quran recited by the Imam, or says yes, the following applies. If this is a result of inner peace and reverence, the prayer is not invalidated. However, if it is due to taking pleasure in the beauty of the voice, the prayer is invalidated. 4. Clearing one's throat by making a noise like a, eh, without a valid excuse or reason invalidates the prayer. However, a cough that occurs naturally without force is considered an excuse and does not invalidate the prayer if this is done to improve or beautify one's voice, to indicate one's presence during prayer, or to correct a recitation error made by one's own imam. The prayer is not invalidated because this clearing of the throat is based on a valid purpose. This is the correct opinion. 5. Saying Yerhamakallah to someone who sneezes during prayer, or saying Amen in response to another person saying Rahamekallah invalidates the prayer. However, if the one sneezing says Yerhamakallah to themselves, it does not invalidate the prayer. Furthermore, saying Alhamdulillah during prayer to remind the one who sneezed to give praise to God does not invalidate the prayer, according to the prevailing opinion, because it is not accepted that this phrase constitutes a response. It is merely a reminder. 6. If one says Sel Salal upon hearing the name Allah during prayer, or if the honorable name of the Prophet is heard and Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is sighed, it is assessed as follows. If a response is intended by this, the prayer is invalidated. However, if it is intended solely as praise and glorification, it does not invalidate it, for this constitutes a remembrance that is not contrary to prayer. 7. If one says La Havu Vela Covet Illa Billah during prayer due to a satanic whisper, the invalidate following applies. If this whisper concerns the hereafter, the prayer is not invalidated. However, if it concerns this world, the prayer is invalidated, for such a whisper is a disturbance. In this case, the phrase La Havu is uttered due to a disturbance related to this world. 8. Person performing prayer may say Alhamdulillah to inform someone, calling them or asking permission to enter, that they are in prayer, or Subhanallah, or makes their recitation audible. This does not invalidate the prayer. 9. Reciting a supplication found in the Holy Quran or the Hadiths during prayer does not invalidate the prayer. In prayer, Allahumma Ekremni, Allahumma Enim Ale, Allahumma Esli Emri, Allahumma zakna afiyete, Allahumma for levi lavalide, lil mu'minin vel mu'minat. However, a supplication such as, O Allah, forgive my father, O Allah, forgive my mother, invalidates the prayer, because such a supplication is not found in the Quran or the Hadith. 10. In prayer, making supplications in a manner resembling human speech, or asking the exalted Allah for something that is not impossible to ask of people, invalidates the prayer. Allahum ashim lahim equals, O Allah, feed me meat. Allahum exadani, O Allah, pay off my debt. And Allahum moazak zefsitin, O Allah, provide me with a spouse, for example. 11. Greeting someone verbally during prayer, responding to another's greeting verbally, or shaking hands to exchange greetings invalidates the prayer. Saying only alaikum or accidentally accepting a greeting also invalidates the prayer. 12. If a greeting is accepted with the hand or head during prayer, or if a gesture is made with the head, eyes, or eyebrows in response to a question or request, the prayer is not invalidated. However, if someone praying is told, move forward and make room for someone else to pray next to you, and they act in accordance with this order, their prayer is invalidated. Because during prayer, one has obeyed the command of someone other than Allah. However, if one voluntarily moves back a little to make room in the row for someone else to pray, it does not invalidate the prayer. 13. Actions and movements considered major during prayer invalidate the prayer. Minor actions do not invalidate it. For example, A. Movement that is not related to prayer or correcting the prayer and is considered a major movement invalidates the prayer. A significant action is one such that, if an outsider were to see the person performing it, they would not doubt that the person is not in prayer. The opposite of this is a minor action, where the observer would doubt whether the person is in prayer or not. Example, if a person who is praying picks up a stone from the ground to throw at a bird or something similar, their prayer is invalidated, because this action is a significant movement. However, if they were to throw a stone already near them with one hand, their prayer would not be invalidated, because this is a minor action. However, they would have committed a sign because they were engaged in something else. During prayer point 14, if a person, while praying, corrects a mistake or a stumbling point in the recitation of the Quran by someone other than their own imam, their prayer is invalidated. This is because such an action is considered teaching and learning. Teaching and learning, however, involve many actions. Yet if one recites with the intention of recitation and this results in correction for that person, the prayer is not invalidated. Similarly, if one corrects for their own imam, the prayer is not invalidated. It does not matter whether the imam has recited enough of the Quran, for this is part of correcting the same prayer. However, if a person praying corrects the recitation of someone who is not praying the same prayer with them, the prayer is voided, because this is considered teaching. 15. If a person scratches their body once or twice in succession, or once or twice in different rakas while praying, the prayer is not invalidated. However, if one scratches 3 times in succession in a single rakah, it is invalidated. However, scratching a body part several times without lifting the hand again counts as a single scratch. 16. Taking at least 3 steps in succession without stopping, without a valid reason, in prayer, invalidates the prayer. Similarly, if a person is struck and through no fault of their own walks about 3 steps from the ground, it also invalidates the prayer. Being pulled out of the place where prayer is being performed in the same manner also invalidates the prayer. 17. During prayer, lifting the turban or garment from the head with one hand and placing it on the ground, or picking them up from the ground and placing them on the head without repeating the action, does not invalidate the prayer. However, if picking them up from the ground and placing them on the head requires a great deal of effort and movement, it invalidates the prayer. 18. If a person praying strikes another person with a hand or a whip, it invalidates the prayer, because this constitutes excessive movement and activity. However, if someone praying on an animal strikes that animal 3 times in a row, it invalidates the prayer. But striking it once or twice does not. This is the correct opinion. Also, to make the animal walk, moving one leg twice does not invalidate the prayer. However, moving both feet does invalidate it. Both feet are considered equivalent to both hands. 19. Riding an animal while in prayer invalidates the prayer. However, dismounting from an animal while in prayer does not invalidate it. 20. Putting on a shoe with both hands during prayer invalidates the prayer. However, easily removing the shoes from one's feet does not invalidate the prayer. 21. If a person accidentally or intentionally eats a single grain of wheat, drinks a drop of water, applies coal to their eyes, applies oil to any part of their body, combs or braids, the hair on their head or beard, their prayer is invalidated, because these are considered significant actions. However, if one applies oil or similar substance from one hand to the head or another part of the body without transferring it to the other hand, this does not invalidate the prayer, because this is a minor act. 22. Picking up a child and breastfeeding it during prayer invalidates the prayer. If a child takes a woman's breast on his own while she is praying and begins to suckle, the following applies. If he sucks once or twice without milk coming out, the prayer is not invalidated. However, if milk comes out or if the child sucks more than twice without milk coming out, the prayer is invalidated. 23. A man's prayer is not invalidated if his wife kisses or caresses him while he is praying. However, if this arouses his sexual desire, his prayer is invalidated. However, a woman's prayer is invalidated if her husband caresses her with sexual desire or kisses her, whether with or without sexual desire. This is because the husband's action is the determining factor in matters of sexual contact. 24. If a person, while praying, merely glances at a book in front of them or takes a quick look to see what is written, according to the correct opinion, their prayer is not invalidated. However, if they were to read verses from the Holy Quran from a copy placed before them or from a mihrab with writings on it, the following applies. If the verses he recites are already memorized by him, his prayer is not invalidated. However, if they are not memorized, his prayer is invalidated as soon as he recites at least one verse. For this constitutes a form of learning. This is the opinion of Imam Azam. According to 2 other imams, the prayer is not invalidated even if one recites extra verses. However, such recitation is disliked. In this, there is a resemblance to the people of the book, Jews or Christians. 25. Random thoughts and actions that come to the mind without a specific intention do not invalidate the prayer. Therefore, if a person, without uttering it with his tongue during prayer, composes a poem or sermon in his mind, he commits a sign, because the heart of such a person is engaged in something else during prayer. However, the prayer is not invalidated. 26. If a person who is praying holds up their fingers to answer a question about how many units of prayer they have performed, their prayer is not invalidated. Likewise, if they write a few words fewer than 3, their prayer is not invalidated. However, if others think he is not praying, his prayer is invalidated. 27. A person praying in congregation, whether for a valid reason or, according to another opinion, without a valid reason, moves to the front, to the right or left, or to the back without turning away from the Qibla, moving 1 rakah's distance at a time, moving 1 row at a time. Their prayer is not invalidated as long as they do not leave the mosque or, if in the open field, do not separate from the rows, because the area where the rows are formed in the mosque and in the open field is considered a single place. Therefore, if there are no rows in front of one who is praying in the open field, his prayer is invalidated by moving beyond the place of prostration. Likewise, if a person praying alone crosses the place of prostration, their prayer is invalidated. For women, their homes are considered a mosque according to one opinion, and an open field according to another. 28. If a Vomit of less than a mouthful is swallowed. Unintentionally, it does not invalidate the prayer. 29. If a person praying turns their chest away from the Qibla without a valid reason, their prayer is invalidated. However, if one mistakenly believes that one has become abdes in a state of impurity due to a reason such as blood flowing from a body part, and therefore intends to turn one's back on the Qibla, the prayer is not invalidated unless one leaves the mosque. However, if this man is the imam and he is replaced by another, the prayer is invalidated. 30. If something occurs during prayer such as a nosebleed or vomiting that involuntarily invalidates wudu, the person is excused. If they wish, they may perform wudu and pray again. This is called resuming prayer, ISLAH SALÂT. This is the preferable course of action. If they wish, they may perform abdes using the nearest available water without engaging in any activity contrary to prayer. And if they were alone, he completes the remaining part of his prayer at the place where he performed wudu or at the place where he had previously begun his prayer. If he was following an imam, he returns to his previous place and completes his prayer there. He cannot stand in a place that would invalidate his, following the imam and then resume following the imam from there. However, if the congregational prayer has ended, they should then act as if praying alone. This act of prayer is also called continuing the prayer, Bina Salat. If such a person leaves nearby water to go far away to perform abdes, or recites the Quran while going and returning, or if their private parts are exposed during this time, they can nitrogen monoxide longer continue the prayer. They cannot perform the remaining part of the prayer they started. They must perform a new prayer. See the appendix. 31. It is unanimously permissible for an imam whose prayer has been invalidated to have someone else take his place. That is to say, if an imam experiences a divine invalidation of ablution, such as a nosebleed, while praying, he should signal or take hold of the garment of a poor, suitable person from the congregation and have them take his place at the mihrab. If only one person is present with the imam and that person is qualified to lead prayer, it is agreed that he should take over as imam. If the imam leaves the mosque without appointing a replacement, or if he is out in the open and has passed the rows, the congregation's prayer is invalidated. Imam remains in the same status. As one who prays alone, he may either perform ablution and complete his prayer, picking up where he left off, or he may start his prayer anew. If the congregation is unaware of this substitution, appointing another to take his place, it is more meritorious to avoid substitution and perform the prayer anew, because in this situation, there may be certain circumstances that invalidate the prayer. 32. If a crumb stuck between the teeth is swallowed during prayer, it is assessed. If it is at least the size of a chickpea, it invalidates the prayer. If it is smaller than that, it does not invalidate the prayer. 33. If the taste of a piece of candy in the mouth reaches the throat without being chewed during prayer, it invalidates the prayer. However, if the taste of a meal eaten before prayer remains in the mouth and reaches the throat with saliva during prayer, this does not invalidate the prayer. 34. If something like gum or a coconut is chewed 3 times in a row during prayer, the prayer is invalidated. This is the case even if it is not swallowed. However, if a small piece of it goes down the throat without being chewed, this does not invalidate the prayer. 35. Fainting or losing one's mind during prayer invalidates the prayer. 36. If someone, out of ignorance, mistakes a 4-unit prayer for a 2-unit prayer and gives the salam after the first sitting, their prayer is invalidated. The same applies if one mistakenly gives the salam during the first sitting, thinking the obligatory night prayer is the Tarawih, or the obligatory noon prayer is the Friday or morning prayer. However, the prayer is not invalidated by giving the salam in this manner due to a mistake.